Awesome. So we'll give folks a few moments to join, but we'll get to know our panelist and moderator a little bit better. So let's go ahead and kick it off with the question, what's everyone's favorite movie? Andrew, let's start with you.
All right, yeah, this one's kind of like an oddball one, but I'm a big fan of A Knight's Tale, starring Heath Ledger, R.I.P. But just loved how like they took a very like medieval theme but applied like modern day of like this is what it felt like using today's kind of pop culture, and I was all for it, and still love that movie.
Totally. That is a great choice. I'm gonna have to rewatch that again. Appy, how about you?
You just stole the thunder, Andrew, because I was going to go with The Dark Knight, and I am also a big fan of Heath Ledger. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Good choice. Good choice all around.
Yes.
Melena, how about you? What's your favorite movie?
I'm not a big movie watcher, actually. I'm more of a TV gal, so this movie's going to be so like typical. But I love Forrest Gump. I can watch that movie every single day. Every single day.
That would take a lot of time.
Yeah.
But that is a classic for sure. Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely a good one. Seth, how about you?
It's a loaded question. I'd have to say The Other Guys, mostly because I have recency bias and I watched that the other week. But the combination of Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell together is
so good. It's hard to beat
I
that.
think it's a very underrated comedy, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good one. Right now, my favorite movie is Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to see that. So good. You laugh, you cry. It's relatable. It's awesome. And another movie that I love so much too, forever, will be 300. Great movie. Yeah, lots of action. Yeah, storyline's great. Love the comic book too. So big fan of that. And if the audience too has any great movies that they want to bring in, please be sure to go ahead and drop that in the chat as well. Yeah, well, let's go ahead and get started then. So welcome everybody to our third day of our Sales Reimagined Summit. Today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar with Modern Sales Pros, it's the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer the toughest revenue questions out there, so that you don't feel alone. You don't have to reinvent the wheel by yourself. We got you back. If you're not a member yet, you'll be invited to join after the summit, and I hope that you will. This summit would not be possible without our amazing sponsors who you see on this slide right here. Kudos to them for making this happen. These amazing orgs are not only sponsoring this specific event that you're about to watch, but the full 3 days and 17 total events of the summit. To learn more about these innovative companies, go ahead and click on the Sponsor Booths tab at the top of this event page and check out all the ungated, valuable resources that our sponsors have made available just for us this week. There might also be some surprises and giveaways in those booths, so definitely check that out. You don't want to miss out on that. So this week's summit will be full of ways to completely reimagine sales for you and your whole org. Whether you're in sales, marketing, customer success, or product, there will be content for you and your team. If you want to see what we've got on the rest of the day today too, be sure to visit the agenda tab at the top of this events page to see our full schedule of events. And here's our agenda for this session today. I'll go over some housekeeping notes. We'll do an introduction. Everybody will do an introduction of themselves, so that way you'll get to know how awesome everybody is, and then we'll dive right into the content. We'll also have time for some live Q&A. So audience, please don't be shy. Drop your questions into the Q&A or right into the chat, and we'll be sure to hit as many as we can. And then we'll wrap up with some key takeaways at the end. Before we dive into the content today, let's go over some quick housekeeping notes. So first and foremost, this event is being recorded. You'll be able to access this recording and the key takeaways on the summit page of the MSP website following this event, so you can share it. Second, familiarize yourself with Goldcast. If you have a question for our speakers, please drop it into the Q&A function on the right side of your screen. And like I said, we'll get them answered. This chat is wide open, so please do interact with each other as well. Feel free to drop in your LinkedIn there too. And anything that you like about any of the points that were just made, so please let us know. Lastly, go ahead and check out all of our amazing speakers and sponsors by navigating to the tabs at the top of your screen. So this panel is titled Prospecting Makes Perfect, the secret behind consistent opportunity creation. And now let's go ahead and get started. Milena will be leading us today. She'll be stewarding the conversation. So Milena, please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Roxy. And hello, everybody. I am so excited to be here with all of your audience and, of course, our amazing speakers, Appy, Seth, and Andrew, to help unleash the secrets behind consistent opportunity creation. Before we get started, I'll go ahead and get us reoriented. I know Roxy gave us a little bit of a breakdown, but I'll just go ahead and do it one more time. I'll go ahead and do a quick intro on me, and then I'll have our speakers tell us about themselves. And then we're just going to get straight to the juicy stuff for the bulk of our time together. Leave the last few minutes for Q&A, although we would really, really love to entertain questions as they pop up on the chat. So please do not be shy. Cool? Awesome. So my name is Milena Call, and I lead the sales team at Atrium. I actually just joined a month ago, so I'm super, super new. But prior to Atrium, I spent a big chunk of my career at SalesLoft. So prospecting and pipe gen hold a very dear place in my heart. And of course, I also worked at Flock Safety, where our AEs were actually full cycle reps. So this further ingrained in me the importance of consistent up creation. So I'd love to hear from our speakers now. Appy, why don't we start with you?
Sure, Milena. Thanks for having me. To introduce myself, I'm Appy. I'm a sales development leader, currently head of sales dev at Blend, been here for 2.5 years. I've been in the tech sales industry for over a decade and also have an engineering and MBA background. Luckily, I got an opportunity to build and lead sales teams, including teams of SDRs, inside sales reps, account executives. Earlier in my career, was able to achieve revenue quotas, manage regional sales. And why I'm excited for this session is I've been dealing with a lot of sales development, prospecting stuff in the last couple of years, a lot of hiring. COVID has really changed how we prospect into organizations. And I have gone from different industries to now finally in fintech. So I bring all of that great experience on how to personalize at scale in these different industries. And that's why I'm excited to be here and share my expertise.
Awesome. Thank you, Appy. Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, hey everyone. My name is Andrew Froning. I am the Senior Manager for Sales Development here at JustWorks. We're a web-based HR service platform for small businesses. And really got my start in sales through Cisco Technology Sales Associate Program, selling IT hardware services to school districts and government agencies. Realized it wasn't too exciting. And then one day I got a nice little LinkedIn message from the founder of JustWorks saying, hey, building out a sales team over here, would love to have a conversation. That was 7.5 years ago. And I joined as an account executive, but got tapped on the shoulder to really be one of our first SDRs and help see that department and program develop when we were only about 30 sales reps. So over the 7.5 years I've been with JustWorks, I've gone from being frontline SDR to being a team lead to managing teams of SDRs. I've developed, implemented, and ran strategic initiatives for sales development. And then most recently, I've been tasked to run the department. So I hope to bring my experience of helping scale and growing in a fast-paced tech environment, and how that kind of evolves within sales development.
That's awesome, Andrew. Congratulations on your recent promotion.
Yeah, congrats.
Thank you. It is about a year ago, so it's been a bit
a
of
year ago. Okay, got it. I
You're still fresh.
So. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Last but not least, Seth.
Yeah, welcome everyone. My name is Seth Cahill. I'm one of the managing directors here at Winning by Design, or not here at Winning by Design, but at Winning by Design. I have the pleasure of working with a lot of companies in the SaaS industry. I actually started off getting into this as an SDR, getting into the tech space, fresh out of college, had my fun doing that, selling into the enterprise ESP space, which if anybody knows, that is a very rip and replace sale and very difficult to get anyone's attention. So I know the struggles of trying to get an executive to get into a meeting. I also have the pleasure currently of working with some of the top business development departments in SaaS today. So I get to see all of the different challenges from selling a PLG product to, a very transactional to, even a very high-end enterprise, and get to work with awesome leaders and really put the model together around what is the science of actually prospecting at scale, but how do we make sure we're keeping the customer at the forefront of that? So I'm going to be speaking a lot about the customer experience as we go through some of the questions today, and making sure that we always keep that lens, even as we think about the kind of consistency that we want to create in opportunities. A lot of that needs to start with the customer, right? And so that's a lot of what we talk about at Winning by Design, and happy to be a part of this panel today as well.
Thank you so much, Seth. Perfect. So thank you so much, gentlemen, all of you. And before we jump to it, just a quick reminder to the audience that I really meant what I said about not being shy about asking questions on the chat. Perfect. So Appy, I'd actually like to start with you. You, like you mentioned, you've built and led various SDR teams of different shapes and sizes and industries. So I'm curious to understand what have been some common themes in your playbooks for driving consistent opportunity creation, and then importantly, that how do you implement that playbook so that it actually sticks?
Yeah, that's a great question, Milena. When I think about opportunity creation and doing that consistently, I'd probably think about using and taking a data-driven approach for it. So understanding the funnel, top of the funnel, understanding conversion rates from number of dials or emails to number of meetings, conversion rates from meetings to opportunities, opportunities to close lost, close won, and also looking at the timelines from stages. So let's say when a meeting gets created to when it happens to when it moves to an opportunity, and by the time it gets closed, understanding all of that data and then using that data to set realistic goals for the team so that they can thrive towards those goals. That's worked for me in different industries. So obviously using data, because the fintech industry works very different compared to the developer industry, compared to when you're selling into marketing executives. And when we talk about implementation, it's a lot about enabling the team on a consistent basis so that they are also looking at this data and they are holding themselves accountable, having those regular motivational check-ins with them. How are they feeling? What challenges they're facing when they're talking to prospects, and making sure that I'm creating a culture of transparency and visibility so that we are aligned towards the same goal and having the consistent opportunity creation process going on.
So it sounds like, first you have to build that framework, right? And it's great because it sounds like it's a universal practice, right? Like regardless of the industry, just understanding the funnel and the data that makes sense to set realistic goals. Like you can do it whether you're selling to fintech or to marketers or developers. Perfect. And then it sounds like, Seth mentioned that he became an SDR straight out of college. So here you're actually teaching the SDRs two things, like to be an SDR, but also how to use data to be more effective. Are there any particular examples of things that you tell them to teach them to use data?
I mean, so we use outreach, and I always ask SDRs to probably at the end of the week spend 20 minutes looking at their open rates for their entire week, their reply rates, and what time did they get those replies and what time did they get those connects. And that helps them understand, and they get into the routine, and they just don't learn from me, but they learn themselves from that data. And that's been working really well.
That's awesome. And I love that you're encouraging them to look at the conversions, not just like at the quantity of calls. Because sometimes like, well, I made my calls, but it's like, did you get any meetings? So it's like the conversions really matter. Awesome.
Exactly.
Awesome. And then Seth, actually similar to Appy, but kind of similar but different. You've also seen tons of different SDR orgs, right, through your clients at Winning by Design. I'd love to hear about what some of the most effective playbooks have in common, like exemplar playbooks that you've seen that you're like, oh wow, like this is good.
Yeah, I think it's the big thing that I see a lot, and I'm always trying to put myself back as an SDR, is the teaching of why. Why am I writing an email this way? Why am I cold calling this way? And more importantly, and I, we were talking about this before the session, it's a lot of the persona. Do I know what you care about as a VP of sales? Do I know what you care about as a head of sales development? What are the pains that you go through each day? We teach a lot of this at Winning by Design, but I think it's really critical as you think about prospecting is you have to articulate to the team, why is it important for somebody to take a meeting with us? They're not just going to take a meeting because they want one. And especially as you go up the chain, it's even harder and harder. So that's where the best I've seen is when the company explains the persona the best of who are you reaching out to and why, and how the product solves a solution to a pain. Not a product that is just saying another feature that you can have in your day-to-day. Like I buy a lot of tools for Winning by Design and some of the things that we actually implement across the board. I don't buy a tool just because there's something I'm trying to solve. So if you can use that inference into what are some of the challenges that they have or Appy might have as the head of sales development, or Andrew as well, I'm going to lead that into prospecting. So I think to Appy's point, it's like, okay, what is working in terms of the days, the times, but also what's working in the messaging? And let's break that down as a group to think about what's working for a head of sales development or VP of sales. And then I think the biggest thing that I see in terms of playbooks is breaking down time. Especially for me, when I was an SDR, it was very difficult to break down your time. Where like, do you spend 20 minutes in the morning and you really just go through who you need to hit up? Do you spend 20 minutes at the end of each day and really prep for your next day? Like getting to that level of granularity with the team is super helpful, where the best playbooks break down the week. How do you spend your week? How do you spend your day? And then how do you do a productive 20-minute session to just get your head in the right space? That level of granularity, when people get to it, is magic, because we can't assume somebody who's younger or maybe fresh out of, a different career path knows exactly what they should do. Like, us with, many years of experience, it's tricky. It's hard to do right. But
I mean, candidly, I still face challenges with managing my time,
yeah,
and I've been around the block. Yeah. It's hard. Like that time management, it's really hard. And to have somebody coach you through it is so practical. Right. And I love what you're saying, because you're talking about making sure that the team understands the why. Like, why would I write these emails? Why would I do this phone call? And who is it for? And then, of course, time. The theme that I see between the two things that you just said are around intentionality.
Yeah.
Right. Like knowing the purpose of both your time and the reason for you reaching out. And, if you look at any job boards and job recs, it's always like, we seek empathetic people. And this, I think, being able to identify with the person that you're trying to sell to really helps to drive that message forth. So tell me a little bit about, like, when you teach the why, what are some of your tactical lessons that you teach to get that message across?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that you can apply to like teaching somebody the why. I think the simplest one is get an expert in the room that's doing it. So if you're a sales engineer at your company, or you have somebody who's in product marketing that's done this role, or, has used your solution in the past, get them in the room and talk through it. Teach them the way they use it, but talk to them through of like, what was your life before and what's your life after? I think the before is really something that sometimes that we skip and just get to the after of like, here's the great benefit that Appy has now in using this product. But like, what was your life before? Like, for example, we just implemented Airtable. I love Airtable. My life before project managing, 20 clients was a nightmare, and it was so difficult to do. Now, after, I can go through a quick list, I can see it, I can customize it per client. I go into a long pitch about Airtable, but the benefits of it are really profound, but because of the before. And before, what my life was, staying up till midnight, updating a project plan in Google Sheets, not a really fun life, right?
So and nobody got time for that.
Yeah, nobody has the time to update a Google Sheet. So I think that's a lot of the teaching the why, is bring in an expert, talk to them about the before, and then explain to them, to Appy's point. I think, Andrew, you talked a little bit about this as well, is like, talk to them about the data. Why should you write 15 emails a day? Why should you make 20 calls a day? You got to teach them the why, because otherwise I think that's just a metric that they have to hit. But you got to explain to them, if you consistently do this, you make money. You are successful. You'll learn from it. But you can't learn if you don't write an email. And so I think that's a lot of the critical things that we see in orgs is just you have to simplify it down and teach them the other side of it, not just say, hey, I need you to write 15 emails today, which I've done that myself. Like we've all made some of those mistakes. So it's natural.
Mm-hmm. And what about from a time management standpoint? What are some practical tips that you guys teach?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to be like clear your schedule and clear your mind. Get rid of app, like turn your phone over, get rid of Slack, and just focus. I think putting your focus time into blocks is really important. And also it's really thinking about breaking down your day. So if you have 9 hours or 10 hours in the day, really conservatively think about it. Like your best thinking is in the morning, write your why in emails in the morning, and then do your kind of tactical stuff that you have to do in your business. I do the same thing where I'm the most creative and, from like 7 a.m. to 10, I'm doing all my creative thinking then, and I try to limit meetings. So try to teach them that as well, is like break down your day for when you operate the best, put into that framework. But Andrew, anything that you do with your group, I know you're practically leading and I'm not. So maybe something from you that you're helping with your groups.
Yeah, it's also to like Appy's point, the data as well. When you're planning out time management is what markets are you calling into and reaching out to? When are those personas and buyers at their desks are more willing to pick up their phones and have conversations? When are they looking at those emails as well and using the data in that way to make sure your team's blocking off their calendars and committing to those blocks? And like, I think we talk about having that focus and blocking off that time, but the big thing too is committing to that. If you say you're going to make dials from this hour to this hour, then make dials. Don't stop after every dial to send out that follow-up email and then start prospecting because you got distracted, thought of something else. And then the next thing you know, you just wasted that block that was supposed to be dialing, doing a whole bunch of other things. So that's something I always stress a lot, is if you're going to block off your time, a big part of that is committing to what you're blocking it off for.
I'm totally guilty of sometimes ignoring my block. So this is a really good reminder.
A quick trick I've shared with my SDRs is whenever they're making their dials, open the LinkedIn tab of every prospect, and you just don't stop making those calls till you actually look at their LinkedIn profile, call them, and then quit that tab. So you don't want to have like 85 tabs open, right? And that works really well so that they don't just have those tabs piling up. They open 15 tabs, make those calls, open 15 tabs, make those calls, and that works effectively.
I'm writing this down. That's so good. That would work with me for sure. And to your point, you're not going to open 85 tabs, like something manageable, like 15, 20, take a 5-minute break, then 15 more. I love that. Andrew, now you differ from Appy and Seth in a really, really interesting way because you've been at JustWorks for almost 8 years, right? Like you started at JustWorks when it was like 3 SDRs, I think, and now it's 34 SDRs.
Yep,
Is that accurate?
Yep.
And growing.
So if you know any good SDRs, send them my way. We're hiring.
That's amazing. That's a really good plug too, because everybody's been talking about the recession. But anyways, so I'm really curious to hear your take on playbooks, because like how has JustWorks playbook evolved in the last almost 8 years, right? Given your growth, and you've seen all of it. So I'd love to hear about, like, for you, about that evolution in the playbooks.
Yeah, so it's been something that, in full transparency, we've needed to hone in and more about. We've relied a lot on trying to focus on like certain markets, be specialized, and hadn't really created a solid foundation from a playbook. They are very critical to making sure your reps know what the best script follow early on when they're brand new hires. It's really, I think back to like when I was an SDR, when I first got hired, I walked into a manila envelope on my desk I was told I was sitting at and saying, all right, here are the things you need to know, go, to now there being a whole online module and resources available for these reps. But it's it's very important that you kind of establish that foundation. If someone, whether it's a rep or a new manager, someone new to the organization, can they pick up a playbook or log into a playbook and be able to do the job effectively and efficiently? And that takes time to develop, working through things. And as you scale, all of a sudden you realize that there's more and more people and stakeholders that are now going to be involved in this. So to really get in early and lean into that, take the time and build out that playbook will save you a lot of effort later on.
It sounds like what you guys had to prepare for was that scale.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know, it's like, okay, teach 3 people how to call and what to say. It's one thing, but then it's like, how do I teach an oncoming class of 10 SDRs? Like, again, ain't nobody got time for that. You have to have that clear playbook that they can absorb almost on their own, and of course with some of your help.
And on top of it, the pandemic showed another reason why you need it is you're not in an office with your peers. Most people aren't anymore, right? So all that, what I call collateral knowledge sharing, goes out the window. The hearing your peers pitch, being able to quickly turn to them and say, hey, how do you handle this? Or how do you do this thing? Heck, even just being next to another person, asking their manager a question and you overhearing the response to that. All that knowledge is very hard to do in a remote environment. So having that playbook as a resource and someplace for your reps to go to is critical now in a remote environment.
The interesting thing is the personas and people we are going after are also not in the office.
Mm-hmm.
So now we need to probably find out what's the best time to reach out, what are their direct lines, when do they check their emails, become more mobile friendly, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, this is, I'm going a little off script here from the questions that we had prepared, but have you guys seen like a decrease in, or how has, I guess, remote work impacted your connect rates on the phone, and how have you adjusted to that?
I'll take that. I mean, when COVID hit, we get most at Blend, we sell into financial institutions, and it's not a super cool industry where folks work in banks and credit unions and mortgage banks for decades, and it's a more phone heavy industry. So right when COVID hit, people were working from home, and we had Zoom info, but we had the regular version where we had the number of direct lines and headquarters. And then after 3 months of analysis, I saw that our connect rates dropped drastically. And I discussed with Zoom Info, do you have any solution? And they offered me their premier version, which comes with super accurate mobile numbers. And we gave it a shot, and it made a big difference. We started getting mobile numbers of our prospects. Slowly, my team started getting more connects, and we're pretty happy with it.
Andrew and Seth, have you guys, it sounds like Zoom Info Premium has worked really well for Appy. What about you guys or your clients in Seth's case?
So we use Zoom Info over here as well. And it's the hardest thing at times too, I think, is helping reps overcome that initial stigma of calling cell phones, right? Not only are we having new reps have to just learn how like get over the stigma of cold calling, now it's teaching them again how like it's okay to call a cell phone. At this point, we all get those calls on our cell phones, and it's going to happen, and it's just another call. I think that is really like what Zoom Info is doing, and you see others like Apollo, I believe, and Seamless to really hone in on that mobile phone number database is going to be something that's going to be worth looking into to ensure you're building those connect rates.
Yeah. And then I'm going to move on a little bit. Actually, I see John's question here, which actually relates to a question that we were thinking about when we were preparing for this conversation. So I love this question. So I'm going to kind of make it a little bit more high level, but it'll touch upon what John's asking about. And so Seth here, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah.
So, back in the day when I was at Sales Loft, I started there in 2016. And throughout my tenure there, I was there for 5 years. We always really valued personalization at scale, right? And then I've gone to other places and I'm like, I wonder if it's personalization at scale should always be the mantra. Now I'm starting to question what I thought was like a universal law. So I'm curious to hear from you, like, what should be the balance between personalization and automation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think we can answer that honestly in 30 minutes. It's probably longer dialogue. Let me break it down from what I see in it. And coming from the email marketing automation space, I think a lot of companies I see today are pushing SDRs into a marketing automation role where they're just sending out generic kind of templates. And if you're looking to do that for pure brand awareness, I would advise against it. Don't do it. Let marketing do that. That's marketing's job, right? Marketing's job is brand awareness. Your job is to be targeted in your approach. And so I think that the difficulty in that is, okay, well, we need to, as Libby's coming to say hi. This is,
hi, Libby.
Hi, Libby. As she thinks about personalization, going for a walk in a little bit, part of the challenge, I think, in that is like, well, how much time does it take to personalize an email? I think somebody asked the question on that. And one of the things that, I advise a lot of companies is break it down. How long should it take them to do LinkedIn and look at Appy? How long should it take them to, spend personalizing that first maybe hook in the email? You maybe spend 10 to 15 minutes max, but you got to give them a time parameter. And that should change depending on the type of product you have, right? For example, one of our awesome clients, Calendly, they have an awesome product. Everyone knows Calendly. It's a little bit of an easier pitch than somebody who has maybe a data security product where you probably have to do just a little bit of more explaining in that. That should dictate kind of the length of your outreach, and it dictates the length of your personalization as well. So you can maybe be a little bit shorter if your product is a little bit more well-known, and then there's a relevant hook. And I think there's always the equation of like, what is the time that you need them to do? So if you have 30 outreaches in a day and you spend 15 minutes to write one email, is it realistic for you to write 30 personalized emails? I think maybe not. One of the ways that we advise companies to think about it is, how do you get personalization at scale and we break an email down into 3 parts: the request, the reward, and then the relevancy, right? The reward piece, I think you can use a bunch of people on your team, Andrew, to collect what is the reward for the industry. So if we're reaching out to fintech, what's that reward that we provide to generally a fintech company with somebody that has, a head of sales development role? What's that value to them? And they're not spending time writing that middle part of the email. They're just tweaking it a little bit for the role. And they're spending the majority of the email, maybe 5-10 minutes max, on that first piece to make it relating to you in the quickest way possible. And that doesn't need to be a personal thing, but a lot of that comes down to teaching. Like, you have to show them what good looks like in a short, hey, how do you spend 10 minutes and let's write an email together and we're all going to do it. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but I think the short of it is like, you got to show them what good looks like. You have to break it down. You have to do clear learnings across the group, and you got to try to avoid being a marketing automation SDR group.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like
all the data that I've seen, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
And so it sounds like you're advocating, no matter the industry, no matter the ASP, for some degree of personalization. There's always something.
For some degree. And like, again, if it's a hyper transactional product, really low ASP, and you get a ton of inbound leads and you just need to get them on the phone, very different than you outbound prospecting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the difference that you need to understand is like, are we inbound prospecting where somebody's coming to us? Are we outbound where they don't know anything about us and they've never heard of us? I think that needs to come into play too, as you think about that equation of like, what is really the outbound motion that we're doing here, or inbound motion as well?
To build on Seth's point, we try to use something called 8x10. And what that means is you spend 8 minutes of research per prospect you're going after, and you decide to send those super personalized emails to at least 10 people per day. So you block an hour and a half, 90 minutes on your calendar to do these 8-minute research on these 10 prospects, and you do that and follow that. That's at least, and It works in the enterprise fintech space, definitely not in the SMB and mid-market space, but that's something we've clicked and it works well.
And just to add another thing that I've seen work pretty well too, and talking about personalization at scale is even personalization becomes almost templated. You start looking at like, all right, I know I'm going to look here to try and get a connection talking point from them on LinkedIn through Sales Navigator. I'm going to look at if they're funded by the same portfolio companies, right? Even personalization becomes pretty templated. And what I tell a lot of reps is if you write a great personal email that you're like, I'm proud of that, make sure you BCC yourself and send it back to yourself and save that in a folder. Mm-hmm. So this way, when you come across a similar situation, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You've already done it once and you get really good with that. And you're not spending as much time personalizing anymore because you've invested that time already.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And you know, Andrea, I definitely wanted to hear from you because you mentioned earlier that for JustWorks, you guys typically sell to the SMB space. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
So I presume typically SMB falls with a lower average sale price. So tell me a little bit about, like, can you go a little bit deeper as to what is your like balance between personalization and automation? Of course, you're doing some personalization, it sounds like, but like, how long should it take for your reps to do that? Should it be 15 minutes? Is that worth it?
I would say no, like a quick five minutes, because again, we have to have that volume there because of the space. And SMB is a very volatile size segment to sell into. And then on top of it, we're selling a very complex solution that's rip and replace. So you have to balance the volume with still the personalization because we're trying to tell small business owners to take away what they're using to pay their employees so their employees can pay their bills, get health insurance and all that. It's not an easy sell, right? So you really need to make sure you're connecting with your prospects, but we also need to get that volume out there because of the segment we sell into. So
but Andrew, it's an interesting, I think that's probably a healthy dialogue there because I'm going to push you on that. Why do you need volume? Because volume doesn't necessarily, to some extent, it does equal more revenue, but it doesn't always mean more revenue. So why, and this is maybe just for JustWorks, like why do you feel like it's a volume game in SMB? Because it honestly, it always isn't. And to your point, if it's rip and replace and it's a business owner, we almost need to be more thoughtful because they have less time in their hands. They have less, aptitude to take a 30-minute meeting because they probably have to go put out another fire at their business. So I'm curious, what was the reasoning behind that for JustWorks? Because there's no perfect answer to it, but I'm curious what was the kind of breakdown there.
It's also about like the data quality as well, because you try and get lists and information, contact information for all these businesses that are being created, growing. People tend to move a lot more frequently in the SMB market. So contact information, and you're going to need some of that volume just to filter out the old information, make sure you're reaching into those people. And that's like, it's very much, I would say, volume early on into the reps tenure, especially as a growing company that we're not in every market. We're trying to establish ourselves. So we need to get that database of information and companies. So that's where the volume, but as a rep progresses and gets tenured and develops that pipeline and knows, all right, this is a legitimate company. This person is here. I've talked to them before. You know what? Last year wasn't a good success, but I'm going to spin up a conversation again. This time I am going to be a lot more personalized.
Okay. So it sounds like a lot of it's like a quality assurance in the data set, which, everyone knows SMB is a nightmare trying to get data sets for it. Half of it's wrong. Like I come from a company 6 cents before winning by design. And part of it was how can you match domains and ISPs and all that great stuff. And in SMB and like 0 to 10 employees, it's just hard because there's no company domain. There's no company ISP that you can register off of. So that's a struggle for people that are selling in 0 to 10. Like I feel through that's really difficult to do. The one thing that I would encourage though is like a lot of what you're mentioning to me is like account research. Like how quickly can you identify this is a bad account? And it's not necessarily an outreach thing, but it's like, if I go to, there's no website and there's no, email address, this is not worth my time. Like, I'm not even going to outreach to them. Is that part of the problem too, of like, how do you set people up to do personalization at scale, of like making sure that we have the right people to go after?
Oh yeah, there's that area that can be improved upon, but I think it also goes down to who at the business, if the person's still there too, as well. Because if you're going to personalize it, you're going to try and personalize it for that prospect and that contact. And if, like, I can't tell you how many times it's like, this number is no longer in service, or you do get their cell phone, they're like, yeah, I'm not at that company anymore.
Yeah.
Darn, I just spent all that time like doing this research for this business, and now they're at a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's difficult. Out of curiosity, and Milena, tell me where to stop, because I'm just curious about this
No,
problem.
I love this topic.
It's a difficult I mean, it's a really tricky problem, especially in that space. And we've had some clients that are similar problems. One of the things that I'm curious on is like, how big is the team to support this for your group? Meaning, this is essential to JustWorks growth as a company, but do we have the operations team that can take a lot of this legwork away from your group? Is that something where you've had to go justify that to maybe some other executives, say, hey, I need some more ops people that can help with this?
I've been fortunate enough that the leadership here has seen that already, and we have an amazing sales operations team. I think my sales ops manager, Suppin, is probably watching this right now, so shout out to him. But it is definitely something that they are a lot more engaged in, and we are investing in that. And I would encourage anyone that is definitely that backbone that needs to be there. To your point, Seth, it's like, it needs to be there.
Yeah.
I just remember, Seth, before this session, we were talking about how back in the day at SalesLoft, we had brought on Jocko from Winning by Design to do a training for us. We also had brought on John Barrows to do a training for us when he was still training. And there's something that he said that I'll never forget, which, he was talking about the difference between being personalized and then being targeted. Personalized and targeted. So personalized can be like, hey, saw that you went to, UGA, go Dogs. Like, I'm in Atlanta. So that was an example that we use a lot. So that's personalized, maybe not that relevant to what I'm trying to say to you, but then targeted can be, different situations. I don't know if it was Seth or Appy that was mentioning, like, hey, like, did they recently have a round of funding? Did they recently get hired? Did they recently hire a bunch of people on the team? So then you can get these different scenarios, and you can actually send automated messaging that's relevant without spending rep time to still kind of stand out in the inbox or in the cold call, right?
Yeah.
Have you guys done a little bit of that too? I mean, of course, you have to do the account research and make sure that people are in the right bucket. But once they're in the right bucket, and maybe to your point, Seth, an operations team can help to do that, then hit go. What do you guys think about that approach?
Yeah, I think a lot of, I'll speak quickly, and then I'll let the two gentlemen who are actually doing it speak a little bit more to it. But a lot of it has to do with explaining the why, to like, why does this vertical make sense? So for example, one of our clients is selling an MDM solution. A lot of what's going on in the market today is, in teaching SDRs this, IT resources are getting cut and people are still hiring. So that means there's a lot more pressure on people to manage their devices. So if you're seeing somebody on LinkedIn with IT people going down and still hiring, that's a great target account to go after, right? Because they have a lot more pain in the IT department. They may be spending a little bit less. They may be looking to cut costs. Those are great prompts. So I think teaching the prompts to that, of like being targeted, is really important. It doesn't necessarily need to be like, okay, you just started as VP of sales. There could be some other company triggers that really are probably more important, and you can justify that a little bit better than, hey, it's great that you're doing just during Atrium. Well, yeah, you probably have 20 other priorities on your plate right now. I'm not sure a conversation makes sense, but that's at least my point of view on it.
I've gotten that email already, by the way, a couple of times.
I'm sure. Yeah. That's
Not kidding.
I did it. I used to as well, so I get it.
Did you guys want to say anything about the idea of being targeted versus personalized before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, I mean, we do have to build in a targeting here, because part of our business model too is, while we work with a lot of SMBs, there's also just like certain industries we can't sell into right now due to our business operations and how we operate. So they, no matter what, have to be very targeted, knowing what businesses we're going after, what industries they're in. And from there, understanding, again, are we going, like, I think Appy brought it up before, like there's something very different between a financial fintech company and Watson & Watson LLP law firm, and just knowing how to be targeted to those two different kinds of businesses.
Yeah.
Agree.
Cool. I see a question from Larissa here. I think that's a really good one. And Appy, I'd like to hear your take on it. But how do you start from scratch? You know, Larissa's talking about, it sounds like her company has grown from other channels and now they want to grow also via an SDR team. What are some things to have in mind in the first 6 months or a year?
So that's interesting because at my previous gig before Blend, I was at a company called Launch Darkly, and I got an opportunity to build the SDR function from scratch.
Awesome.
And we took it to up to 30 global SDRs in a span of 2.5 years. So I'll try to recall what we did in the initial 6 months. It was understanding who our ICP was, making sure that we nail that down, trying to find out what their responsibilities are, what are their pain points, and are there any key initiatives they are usually working on, and then relating our value prop to their responsibilities, pain points, and key initiatives. It took us a couple of weeks, probably a month and a half, to figure that high level value prop and how should we be reaching out to these people, and then set a regular cadence of emails, phone calls, because we didn't even know what's going to work in that specific industry and persona. Regular cadence of calls, emails, LinkedIn socializing, and started building out the playbook. The interesting thing is the first two SDRs who we tried to hire were senior SDRs and go-getters. So that worked out really well because they could take ownership of their role and they knew the game, and they just helped me continue to build and scale the model that, okay, we're probably going to send 100 emails per week. We're probably going to make 200 calls this week. We are going to do 50 LinkedIn actions, and we'll do that for 6 weeks and get back with some data and take it from there. And that helped me scale it. And those reps helped me replicate it with the other additional SDRs who we got to hire.
Andrew, what about you? I feel like this is relevant for you too. I mean, there's 3 SDRs when you started. That's almost like 0. It's very few. What are some tips that you can give to Larissa as she gets her SDR machine going?
Yeah, so I was just in general very early on into JustWorks selling our product. And to Appy's point about knowing your ICP, so like if you already have a full cycle sales team or those account executives, where are they finding success? How are they having those conversations? Don't reinvent the wheel, right? If you know what's working on one side of the business, just apply it to the SDR org in terms of how you're having those conversations. I'd also like, what's your focus? What's your outcome? Are you looking at just getting meetings and getting your AEs at bats? Or are you at a stage where you're selling in a certain segment where, no, we don't really care about how many at bats we're getting. We just need solid connections, fully qualified meetings. What do you want those outcomes to be? Is another thing you have to consider. And that then will dictate, like, all right, if this is the outcome we want, this is kind of based on our average sales price and volume, like, and this is what my department's now responsible for to make sure that CAC over LTV, the LTV CAC equation still that 3x or higher. Like, what makes sense to make sure this program is viable, and then back out of that and start going at it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. And we have 10 minutes left roughly. I want to end sort of on a high note here because, I've said this before. I think that the SDR orgs are arguably the most important in a company. They're literally the heartbeat of a company. It's and without your heart, like if you have no pipe, what do? There's nothing to close. So, and it's a hard job, right? It takes a lot of grit. It's a lot of rejection. It's often an org that is seen as an afterthought, unfortunately, even though it is the heart of a sales org at least. So how do you guys think about career progression and motivation and making sure that your team is fulfilled? Seth, why don't we start with you here? Because I think you've probably seen a lot of different scenarios here that I'm really curious to learn about.
Yeah, I think a career progression at SDR is an interesting one. There's so many avenues that you can go into. I think a lot of times, and I work with a lot of enablement leaders who are awesome, but I think onboarding and career development is very underdeveloped in most organizations. It's not a really planned out thing. It's like, oh, you've reached this quota. Now you're ready to go be a rep.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, well, have you had a discovery call yet? Do you know how to demo the product? Do you know how to negotiate a contract? Do you know what's even in our contract? So there's a lack of understanding there. So one of the things I would say to that is like, where does an SDR naturally go to your org? For a lot of companies I work with, sometimes it goes naturally into CS and then into sales, where maybe you have a more higher transactional volume in your CS department, where it makes sense to go there. One of the things that I would look at is what are the skills that you're giving your SDRs? Meaning, to Andrew's point, are they taking qualification calls? Are they looking to understand and talk to the customer? And I think one of the things that you should assess is like, as you look at a career development plan for SDRs, what are the skill sets needed to whatever that role is? And then when are they checking the box to say, I feel comfortable that they at least know and have certified to me that they can do the skill enough to where I'm comfortable. Whether it's, writing an email, whether it's, making a cold call, stepping that into that progression, I think is really important. And you should look at it earlier than often. And I think the earlier you teach that to an SDR, the better SDR they're going to be. The more they know about discovery process, the more they know about demos, the better they're going to write emails, the better they're going to be working with AEs in different departments. So I think as you look at career development, you have to break it down into micro skills of what are the skills that I need to be successful, and then teach those continually earlier on, and then have them certified to you. Say, hey, take a lead that we probably know is bad. I'm going to walk through a discovery call with you, and we're going to do it together.
So to your point about career development, Rich Harris had a great episode on his podcast not too long ago about like the differences between millennials and Gen Zs, because that's going to be a large portion of our workforce now is that Gen Z, and they have different motivations, and one of it is they don't really necessarily care about those many like title changes. They want to know, how am I progressing in my career? Where is that going? And it's going to be very critical to retaining that talent. We here actually luckily invested early on into our sales development. I tell people all the time that development's a big portion. It's the most important word in our title. If you develop talent, the sales will come. If you focus on developing sales, the talent's going to leave. All right. We, after an SDR progresses through their time in their SDR role, we have a 3-month training program to prepare them to become account executives before they're placed on a team. And if they don't meet certain requirements to be put on a team, they stay in that role until we feel they are ready to be successful in that role. And we've had 250 SDRs come through our program, and 116 have found roles outside of the sales dev and progressed. 16 of them have become people managers. And a lot of them are in other departments because they were able to interact with those departments and find their interests, find their skill sets, and develop that. And it's something I think other companies, and even here, we can still lean further into.
Appy, what about you? How are you guys keeping your reps? Maybe if you have something interesting to say about career progression, that's great. But what happens in between that career progression? How do you keep your reps motivated when it's such a hard job that often goes overlooked?
I mean, going back to career progression, me being a sales leader, sales development leader at Blend, part of my role is to make sure I'm making connections internally with sales leaders, CS leaders, sales enablement leaders, operations leaders, and leaders within the marketing space, so that anytime I see a specific skill set and strength within an SDR, I can retain that SDR by having them connect with that leader and trying to get the best out of them. So what works with me is during the 9 to 12 month period of a successful SDR, I have a list of 5 leaders they got to meet. They need to meet an AE manager, a sales enablement manager, a CS manager, and a demand gen leader. And after having those 4 conversations, they try to make a decision where do they want to grow into, what do they want to do. Most of them want to become AEs, so I partnered with AE managers and created an actual demo certification process with a proper rating system, which gives the tenured SDR a rating that, oh, you score 45 out of 60, and these are the places where you can improve. And that's kind of a reality check, because you being a successful SDR doesn't mean that you'll be a super successful AE. Back to Seth's point, and that gives them a reality check that, well, I am a great SDR, but do I know how to do a good discovery call? And that works really well. And then they start building on the score they get, they learn from that, and they basically develop themselves accordingly, because now their career is in their own hands. So that has worked well for us, Milena.
I love that. Thank you so much, Happy. Hey, Roxy.
Hello. So sorry to interrupt you guys. I feel like you guys could keep on going. Thanks for all
True.
of that. And y'all seem like very supportive managers. So shout out to that. Really. Yeah. So just really quickly, just want to get a very brief key takeaway from you guys. So just a really quick little short tweetable quote. Seth, let's go ahead and get started with you.
Yeah, I think I said this about 25 times in the session, but make sure you teach the why. Don't assume they know the answer to it. Show them the way and break it down into little small micro components and focus on that. Focus on teaching versus managing. I think the worst thing you can do is manage somebody. So that's longer than a tweet, but I would say focus on the why and why it matters to them.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. You don't want to assume. And Abby, how about you?
For me, I think the key takeaway would probably be, hire for the right mindset, and then know how to keep those reps motivated. And then they'll probably automatically go above and beyond.
Awesome. Milena, do you want to throw in a key takeaway in there for you as well?
Yeah, what Seth was talking about, time management, and just, knowing what it is that you have to do and dedicating the time to do so, as well as staying true to your time blocks. That's something that I'm taking away personally.
Cool. And Andrew, how about yourself?
Yeah, it's really invest in your people, like consistently evaluate your processes and create a culture of collaboration that really allows your teams to be adaptive to what brings the most success, especially in an ever-changing environment.
Awesome. Yeah, you better be able to adapt. All right. Well, thank you so much, you guys. That was a lot of knowledge to drop on our audience. We really appreciate that. Thanks for taking the time out of your days to speak on our panel. And for those of you in the audience, be sure to stick around because we still have some more amazing events after this. Next up, we have a fireside chat with Kyle Porter, founder and CEO at Sales Loft. And that'll be going live in just a few minutes. Go ahead and copy the link that I'm about to drop into the chat and share it with anybody on your team that you think needs to know. And for you panelists, I'll see y'all backstage. Thank you so much again.